It's been about 18 long years since we've last really heard from Shadow in a Sonic game. I'm not counting the Sonic Forces DLC. But since the failure of Sonic 06 way back when, he's more or less been nothing more than that guy that just broods in the background with his arms folded in every other Sonic game. That's if he's even in it at all to begin with. But with Sega declaring 2024 being the year of Shadow, and in preparation for the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie, our edgy little friend is finally getting some love again, and is finally even getting his own sort of standalone game. Hello everyone, my name is Argonaut, and thanks so much for stopping by. In this video, we're going to talk about Sonic and Shadow Generations, and quick warning, there's going to be light spoilers about the game in this video. But with that, let's move on with the video, and be sure to like and subscribe if you like what you see here. I really appreciate it, and it helps keep this channel alive. And with all that out the way, on with the video. Shadow, Shadow, Shadow. Where to begin? He originally appeared in Sonic Adventure 2, which came out way back in 2001 for the Sega Dreamcast. You remember that thing, right? The Sega Dreamcast? And was intended to only appear for that one game. But due to so much popularity from fans, Sega brought him back for 2003's Sonic Heroes. And then again for his own spin-off game later on. And I can say it feels like it. And by that, I mean, in Sonic Adventure 2, you can tell the game revolved around Shadow and he fit in perfectly for it. But for every other main Sonic game that appeared afterwards, it just felt like the writers didn't fully know what to do with the character. But, I mean, it's gotta be a little bit rough, right? I mean, he essentially has more or less all of the powers and abilities that Sonic has, while at the same time, he can do a bit more than Sonic can. With his Chaos powers, it just feels like he has more in his grab bag than Sonic, and Sega can't exactly have him upstaging their main character, which is why in every game he either gets his own story, or he's completely off on his own, or he just doesn't appear at all. And on top of that, it just felt like the writers didn't know what to do with him story-wise either. In Sonic Heroes, we get this whole plotline of, is he the real Shadow, or is he just a robot? Not to mention that Shadow had amnesia. In Shadow the Hedgehog, as the name implies, he gets his own story, where he still had amnesia, and the game had multiple endings, where you gotta think, is he a robot, or is he an alien? Which we can all accept now, but at the time it was more like, aliens? Then, after the failure of Sonic 06, which I'm still hoping Sega would try and remake one day, the way it was supposed to be, Shadow would be put into a long, long hibernation for 18 long years. Now, before we talk about Shadow Generations, we've got to quickly talk about Sonic Generations. I mean, might as well. Sega threw it in with Shadow Generations anyway. Originally released in 2011, Sonic Generations was made to celebrate Sonic's 20th anniversary, and had modern Sonic meeting classic Sonic, and teaming up to go through classic and modern stages of the main Sonic games at the time. It was basically just a huge love letter for the fans of the series. And now, this is me speaking purely off of memory alone, because I unfortunately left my Sonic game at a friend's house years ago, and haven't seen it since. But I remember the game not having the greatest story, but just being a lot of fun to play with both Sonics. And I love how the game even acknowledges failed Sonic games like Sonic 06. But with this current remake, while it's okay in some places, it also feels buggy and janky in others. Sega can probably fix it with a few updates, but let's face facts here. this game was mainly made with Shadow Generations in mind. I knew that Sonic Generations' story wasn't the greatest, but this is practically filled with nothing. The story is about as empty as the white space void that you find yourself running around in. It's just stop Eggman as you go through levels from Sonic's past and rescue his friends, who then proceed to just stand around and not even help you for whatever or reason. And I remember having fun with the Supersonic part back during the PS3 days, but this may be one of the top 3 worst Supersonic stages that I've ever played, with Sonic Superstars still holding its spot as the worst. But, all that aside, playing through the stages, not counting Planet Wisp, was still pretty fun and suited both modern Sonic's boost playstyle and classic Sonic's platforming playstyle, and a fun trip through memory lane. But, at the end of the day, you can tell Sega just put this game here simply to help sell Shadow Generations, and probably because they didn't trust a standalone Shadow game after last time. Never forget. Not to mention that Shadow's been involved in so little and everything that they probably didn't even have enough content with him to make a full game. And with that out of the way, we now move on to the real selling point of this game: Shadow Generations. Shadow Generations gives Shadow a whole new narrative from his perspective during the events of Sonic Generations. Before you even start the game, you should start off watching these 4-part beautifully animated shorts that Sega made as a prologue for this game called Shadow Dark Beginnings. They're all free to watch on YouTube. I'm not going to spoil the story for them, but they're short and I highly recommend that you check them out. Although I will say, Emerald appeared in one of them. Remember him? From Sonic Battle? Way back in the day. I wonder if Sega's going to do anything with him again in a future project. But, anyways, Shadow Generations involves Shadow heading to the Ark during the events of Sonic Generations after picking up on a strange energy source. After arriving, it turns out that it was from Black Doom, who was able to respawn himself from a hive mind creature that was on board the Ark and is trying to turn Shadow into becoming his ultimate creation and take over his body so he can become the ultimate life form. As Shadow pursues him and tries to stop him, he gains new powers and abilities, which further separates him from being an edgy Sonic with a different skin. And as you keep playing further, because the past, present, and future are all melding together, Shadow also ends up meeting Maria and Dr. Gerald again. And with that, I don't want to spoil the story anymore. Maybe I'll make another video where I fully discuss the story in detail and talk about my feelings on the matter. But, as you play through the game, you get taken down memory lane to a whole bunch of stages from previous Sonic games that Shadow's been to before. And it took me a while to notice, but Act 1 of every stage is usually in 3D, and Act 2 of every stage is in 2D, similar to how Sonic plays, which is kinda weird. It made sense for classic Sonic, but doesn't make as much sense for Shadow, at least to me. Not to mention the fact that one of Shadow's stages are actually from Sonic Frontiers, which Shadow had absolutely nothing to do with. And, ironically, they didn't use any of the stages from Shadow the Hedgehog, his actual game. But all in all, the gameplay for Shadow is fun. He handles way better than Sonic does in Generations, and with all of his new abilities, they just add a layer of fun and replayability to every level that you play. Speaking of the levels, each level is well designed and visually beautiful to play, with multiple different routes that you can play, which further adds to their replayability. The music for Shadow Generations is also pretty catchy. Not every track will be your new favorite song, but you'll definitely find yourself humming some of them without even noticing. And the bosses themselves are also pretty fun, challenging experiences. Although I really hated the third boss fight for Shadow, because I had a ton of trouble with Doom Swing. But all of them have some type of history with Shadow. Except for Metal Overlord. I mean, Shadow fought him a little bit back during Heroes, but that was really kinda more Sonic taking him out. But hey, you know what? Who cares? Because we get to hear What I'm Made Of again, and I freaking love that song. And when you're not in a boss fight or level, you wander around White Space, where there's a whole bunch of collectibles you can find and challenges you can do. You can obviously tell that Shadow's White Space was inspired by Sonic Frontiers, and I have no problem with that. It gives you a lot to do and explore, which breaks up the monotony of you just going from level to level. And let's face it, this game doesn't have too much content level-wise. If you don't have to wander around White Space to find everything, you could probably finish Shadow Generations in about 2 hours, if even that. But, looking at the last couple of Sonic games, Sega's moving away from the safe, lighthearted Sonic stories that they've been doing for almost the past decade, and taking some chances again. And they're finally moving in a new direction, and I, for one, am personally excited to see what they do next. And now, for the score. I was actually unsure of how to score this one, since you're basically getting 2 games in one, and while Shadow Generations is lacking content, Sonic Generations feels a bit dated. But again, let's face it, we're mainly here to talk about Shadow Generations, and Sonic is just tacked on so people will buy it. But with Shadow Generations, the graphics look great. I'd actually say they're probably the best graphics in a Sonic game to date. Gameplay-wise, the levels are gorgeously designed and offer a lot of replayability. Not to mention, Shadow's new abilities also offer new ways to approach the levels. White Space is a nice diversion to keep you playing, so you don't finish the game too fast, with plenty of things to explore, and I think the story is one of the better Sonic ones. Shadow Generations, as a standalone game, gets an 8 out of 10 from me. All in all, this marks a great return for our edgy hedgehog, and I can't wait to see Sega's next 3D Sonic game. Not exactly 2D, I still remember Superstars. Sonic Generations, on the other hand, feels a bit soulless. The levels are fun, besides Planet Wisp, although it feels a bit janky, and there's definitely a few bugs here and there that Sega most likely won't even bother to work out. The remixed music tracks for the levels are catchy, but the Supersonic level was by far one of the worst that I've seen in a while. Not to mention, the story might as well have been written by a 3rd grader, and everything's just empty when you're not in a level. And your friends might as well just be cardboard cutouts that say, "You can do it!" as they proceed to do nothing. This game definitely shows its age, and on its own, this game is about a 6 out of 10 for me. But if you just think of this game as a game that's included with Shadow Generations, or if you've never played it before, the score for both games together is still an 8 out of 10 for me. Would I recommend this game to anyone else? Yes. The game is typically $49.99 and is a great return for Shadow, with its tacked-on Sonic story, and if you're a believer in having a physical copy like I am, I'm going to include a link in the description of this video. It also comes with a cool reversible case, if you're not the biggest fan of that default box art like I am. I mean, why Why would they go with that default box art when they could have used this optional box art? I don't understand the decision making there. I mean, look at it. It looks like a throwback to Sonic Adventure 2. But what do you think? Do you agree with my thoughts, or do you disagree? Let me know in the comments section below. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you like what you see, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it helps me out a lot. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.